There are a lot of use cases for payers as well as US providers to develop a data fabric architecture that's based on standards that's going to help them get to the next level, to improve efficiencies, to reduce costs, to improve patient outcomes ultimately.
Hello and welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Health Launchpad and HIMSS. I'm your host for today. I'm Adam Chirinas. I'm the CEO and founder of Health Launchpad. And I want to thank you today for joining us. And I also want to give a big thank you to my partner in bringing this podcast to you, the awesome HIMSS. Great firm to work with, and I'm really privileged to work with them on this. So why would you want to listen to this podcast? Why are we even doing this thing? I'll tell you why. I had my own healthcare technology business. I launched it in 2012 with a physician. And I, at that time, had no real clue about how you sell and market to healthcare. And I got to tell you, having worked in other categories, I found it to be the toughest category that I've ever operated in. And so, the reason why we're doing this podcast is that, I think we could all do with a little bit of help from experts. And so this is an opportunity for you to hear from leaders in healthcare technology marketing. And today's episode is going to be a great one. I've got a really smart guest here today, somebody who has been a long-time technology marketer in healthcare and in other sectors as well. And I'm delighted to introduce you to today's guest,
Lucy Railton
from Smile CDR. So welcome to the podcast. And
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. And so Lucy, tell us a bit about yourself, and also tell us about Smile CDR. That's a very interesting company, and they're on a tear right now, right?
We are, absolutely. So I'll start with Smile. So Smile CDR is a health technology company. We provide the healthcare industry with solutions to help them adopt open standards with the goal of supporting an intelligent flow of data. The blockage of data has been a long concern of the healthcare industry around the globe. And so with our tools and our expertise, we can help them, improve efficiency, reduce costs, generate some new value, and ultimately improve patient outcomes. So we have a data fabric solution, an integration platform, if you will, that is helping our customers who are healthcare providers and payers and researchers and government organizations use open standards. So whether that be the FHIR standard or process standards, to just really support kind of the liberation of health data, if you will, and digital transformation. So as you mentioned, we are absolutely growing rapidly. I think when I started with the company, which was 18 months ago now, I think, I was employee number 52, I think. And we are now well over 250 employees and going to be growing at a similar pace in this next fiscal year.
That's terrific.
Crazy.
That's great.
A little bit about me. I have been around quite a while, and I've been executing digital marketing campaigns almost before that term was coined, if you will. So in the late 90s, I'm really aging myself here. In the late 90s, I worked for a startup that was one of the first WYSIWYG website creation tools out there.
WYSIWYG.
Yeah, what you see is what you get, right? That's an old term. That was like, now we talk about click and drag and being able to, you don't need code to develop a website. So they were really ahead of their time in the late 90s. And we were using PPC and email marketing, and although it was done in a very different way than it's done today, we were using those channels, and they were some of our best performing channels. And since then, I've moved on, become like a HubSpot champion. I've been using that marketing automation software for well over 10 years. Had a short stint as an agency owner. Adam, I know your life is one of a grind.
I love it.
Supporting local businesses in my area as a HubSpot agency. And as you mentioned, the bulk of my career has been in B2B technology with mostly startups. The healthcare industry is new to me since joining Smile, but I've definitely learned a lot in the 18 months that I've been here about the healthcare industry.
Well, this is you've certainly picked it's a challenging place to start in healthcare, because healthcare is a steep learning curve, and what Smile does and the whole growth of FHIR technology is really complicated to get your head around. Now it's like, so how do you make the concept of what you do clear to people? Because it is kind of amorphous.
It is. So it's something, honestly, that we've struggled with. So being new to the industry and talking to the people in our team are subject matter experts about FHIR and data processes. We are not necessarily. We definitely have more subject matter expertise on the team now, but at the time when I started, we didn't necessarily have internal subject matter experts about our target audience, which is, currently primary U.S. payers and U.S. providers. And many of us were Canadians, and our healthcare system is completely different. It's not privatized. So it was a steep learning curve to understand, who our target audiences are, to be able to develop the, ICPs and the personas, and what drives them, and how do we customize our messaging so that they can understand what we do. The FHIR community, they got it. They're in the FHIR community, they got it. We didn't even have to say anything except maintainers of Happy FHIR, and they got it. But yeah, it was definitely something that was a steep learning curve, and we're always polishing it. We're always testing the message and improving it. So I don't know if I'll ever say it's perfect.
No.
And I don't know if I can answer that question for how do I figure that out, because you do it with testing, right? You test a message, you see how it resonates.
So how do you test it? What sort of things do you do?
You really have to embed that testing methodology or philosophy in everything you do. So it could be just landing page copy. It could be paid search copy or paid social copy. You need to kind of make sure that your message cascades through all of those elements, and that you have different iterations to test. And then you literally see where the results are getting you. Did we get leads from our target audiences? Do those leads turn into opportunities and revenues with the right kinds of businesses? It takes time, but you have to be testing nonstop.
Right. Absolutely. Very interesting. So let's step back a bit. Tell us about, what's your marketing strategy? How are you generating demand?
Digitally. Everything is digitally. We definitely have people in our team who are responsible for kind of the more traditional marketing, communications, and brand. But the rest of the team is focused on digital. So we're starting off with some light account-based marketing. We're doing lots of paid search engine organization or optimization. We are doing paid social and content, lots and lots of content development, because it supports everything. It supports not only our digital marketing team, but it supports the sales development reps, as well as our direct sales team. Gives them resources to go to help build trust and to share the stories.
Talk a little bit about the audience that you're trying to reach, and what are the sort of tactics that you think you're getting the greatest traction with, without giving away the competitive.
Yeah, sure.
Piece.
Well, I can say that last year our primary focus was U.S. payers. They had the patient access API compliance that they had to adhere to. The enforcement deadline was July 1st. So they were scrambling to find solution providers. Unfortunately, we had already started to build our name for ourselves prior to me joining Smile's employee, I was helping them as a consultant develop their first piece of content for payers roadmap to compliance, and it performed phenomenally well. It spoke to what they needed, which was what is the best way, kind of best practice way to develop an infrastructure that's going to support current legislation requirements and future requirements. Obviously, the CMS is mandating a lot of data sharing using the FHIR standard. So in that case, that piece of content was at the right place in the right time, because there was a huge demand. So we've gotten to know that payer audience well, and we just continue to talk to them about future use cases, which are not only compliance, that's a big driver for them, but other use cases like digital transformation, which has been a buzzword that's been around the healthcare industry for years and years and years, but reducing inefficiencies, right? Reducing costs and ultimately improving or reducing member churn. So there are a lot of use cases for payers as well as US providers to develop a data fabric architecture that's based on standards that's going to help them get to the next level to improve efficiencies, to reduce costs, to improve patient outcomes ultimately.
I
so
see.
when we know that, then we know it's a little bit easier to tell the stories that are going to resonate with them. And we talk to not only the C-levels who are responsible for finance and for compliance and for technologies, but also the director level, the people who are responsible for developing the systems that are supporting those organizations.
So you've got a very clear, quite very narrow audience. You're really tuned into what their pain points are.
Yeah, we're starting to become more and more tuned in, yes.
Right. And so you take a particular issue, so a compliance issue or a particular use case, and then talk about the elements of a campaign. I get that content's at the center, but just break that down a bit.
Well, what campaign is used for which piece of content is something that differs based on the perceived value of that content and the purpose of that content. But if we're talking about a campaign for a specific persona, we definitely try to map out all of the content that's supporting a specific need or pain point together. So we know that these blogs are supporting this gated content, and this gated content is promoted in this way. And it could be a myriad of ways that we promote it, either through email marketing or email nurturing or through paid search, paid social, as well as at outbound prospecting from our SDR team. So the campaigns are very nuanced and really, as I mentioned, dependent on the content.
You've got a really clear picture there of all the different elements and how they work together. I think you mentioned HubSpot. I can't remember. Are you? I think you're a HubSpot. You're on HubSpot.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
So, are you able to? One of the cool things about HubSpot is that for a particular target, a particular contact, you can see the breadcrumb trail of everywhere that they've been. Do you? But I'm not really sure how many people actually use that in anger. I'm just curious as to whether or not, how you might use that, kind of how the SDRs might use it, for example.
Absolutely. We have triggers in place that kind of let the SDR know when an important prospect, assuming they've converted at some point on our site, because that's the only way that HubSpot knows who they are, is if they've once converted, or they will follow them with cookies, but you won't know what pages they've been to until they've converted, Right. Bob Smith, for example, prior to converting, checked out all of this stuff on your website. So absolutely, we're looking at that information as we're doing outbound prospecting, but we're also looking at that information when we want to report to the executives how marketing has influenced revenue. All of our goals line up to that revenue influence, and we have a pretty lofty goal. So HubSpot does have a great tool for revenue attribution, but I think it works better when you have a simplified buying process that can remove a person, right? If it's more automated, if it's more online, I can choose online to just, check out something, then that HubSpot kind of revenue attribution works really, really well. Our buying cycles are pretty long. The process is a little more complicated. So then, unfortunately, the process for identifying revenue influence and revenue attribution is a little more laborious as well. And we 100% will use that source information and see the timing of when they engaged with marketing content, because we may not have turned a certain person into a lead. It could have been a salesperson who reached out and added them to the database. But if they engaged with their content along that process, along the buyer's journey, then we for sure influence them. We help develop trust. We help to educate them. And as they're working the sales team collaboratively, we've been able to bring that prospect forward in their journey. So we want to be able to say, we influence that sale.
That's really interesting, and it's great hearing the sort of that you've got some real discipline around how you're doing that. You've had the opportunity to create a marketing capability, a marketing operation, kind of from the ground up.
Yeah.
How are you doing it? So how are you structuring the team, and what's the engine that you're building here?
So when I started with the company, there was one person in sales. And at the time, we didn't realize how rapidly we would grow. So, the first plans for the first few months were just to hit the ground running, to get some initial quick wins. And within a few months, we realized that we were going to need a very substantial team. So we had some people on our team who I call gifts, because they were really great referrals from people in the time, but they were very green. So at the time we're growing the team, we're also coaching and educating and developing processes. We literally started from zero. We didn't know what task management system we wanted to use, project coordination. And we went through a few iterations before we found one that worked for everyone. And it's probably not one that people are familiar with. We're using Jira and Confluence, and it's working really well to keep us all on top of not only what our projects are and our tasks are, but how they might affect somebody else in the team, so that we don't have somebody at the very last minute given this big project that someone knew about for 2 months. And, you now have a week to finish this. So it took a while to get there. It took a while to grow that team and nurture that team and bring it on. We are now a team, 18 months later, a team of 16.
Wow.
And we will probably be a team of 20 by early in the new year.
Fantastic.
So we have a team that's responsible for digital marketing and SEM, obviously. They're doing the search engine optimization, the paid search, and they're doing the paid social, the email nurturing. They're also responsible for the HubSpot web pages, right? So the marketing pages, if you will, are on HubSpot. We have a team that's responsible for the traditional side of things, the brand. So we're very particular about our brand. If you're a startup and you don't have strong brand guidelines, people will start to do their own thing, and then you don't get full value, full pop for that brand recognition when you're doing, lighter marketing initiatives, right? You want to make sure that you're consistently and persistently showing the same brand and sharing messages. So we have somebody responsible for that, for those guidelines. Make sure as a team we're doing the same thing. And that team is also responsible for the social media, for press releases, and working with our PR agency to do the media pitching, and the traditional partner cooperative marketing, as well as our product launches and marketing. We don't just have one product. We have a few products and more coming down the road. So we work with the product management team to kind of develop the launches and the resources that help educate not only the sales team, but also our prospective customers. And then we also have a content team, and obviously what they do supports everyone. They're responsible for understanding our ideal customer profiles and our personas, and mapping content to their buyer's journey. We really struggled in the first year to get that content engine going. And it's going now. So we have a lofty goal to have about 60 pieces of content in the first 6 months of the calendar year 2020. Already scoped out 40 pieces for the first 3 months. So we can't do that without agencies like yours and other freelancers. So there's a lot of balls in the air.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of content and balls in the air in that way. We're salivating for. We're like, hurry up.
Absolutely.
It's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've just started our sales development team. So we have a group of internal SDRs and an SDR manager, as well as outsourcing some of the SDR function. And sometimes, they can be found to be reporting in the sales team, but we believe when they report to marketing, they can be much more closely aligned with what our ABM programs are doing.
Absolutely. Yep.
And honestly, the performance is measured similar to marketing campaigns as opposed to traditional sales teams. Yep. So it's a pretty large team and it grew pretty quickly.
It's extraordinary.
And with that comes challenges, obviously, and a lot of chaos. But, we're starting to
I think you guys are like swans. It's like you actually on the surface you all seem.
I use the analogy ducks. We're 100%
ducks. All right, ducks. Yeah. Swans are more elegant, but ducks is absolutely right too. On the surface you look fine, but paddling frantically underneath the surface.
Yes, they are. They are frantically paddling for sure.
That's terrific.
And in the new year, we're going to probably bring in somebody who's going to help us with revenue operations. I mean. Yep. The marketing team is not the only team, obviously, that grew. I mentioned that we're now over 250. The sales team is growing. The sales engineering team has grown. The customer success team has grown. Our operations team has grown as well. And right now, everybody in the revenue generation team, so the sales and marketing team, we are very well aligned and we collaborate well together. But we want to make sure we protect that as we grow. Absolutely. And revenue operations and controlling that as a way to ensure that we're going to get the intelligent data we need to test and to grow, to analyze and grow. And we can be collaborative and make sure that everybody's on the same page.
That connection between the SDRs and the revenue operation is like they are the glue between sales and marketing. That's
absolutely. Yeah. Between sales, marketing, in our case, sales engineers, product management, and customer success. That revenue operations manager, if you will, we haven't quite scoped that out, will be the kind of the bridge between all of that. Make sure we're all rowing or paddling our little feet to the same goal. Yeah.
So one of the things you touched on was use of social. And I think you guys use social in a really compelling way. Like, I see you a lot on LinkedIn. And I think that that's one area that I think a lot of companies struggle with. So how are you, I know it's early on, but what's your philosophy on social media?
We definitely have a cadence that we would like to stick to. And we have a different cadence for LinkedIn than Twitter. Because we are a B2B technology company, we don't really, thankfully, have to use Instagram or TikTok, although I spend way too much time watching TikTok videos. But anyways, we don't have to necessarily do those. Other businesses that do, I'm sure, are far busier with social. But we have, a requirement of multi-touch days for Twitter, a minimum of piece of content shared or a piece of engaging thought leadership shared on LinkedIn on a daily basis. But we sometimes exceed that cadence, which I think is needed because everyone is so busy. If you're not posting on a regular basis and posting the same piece of content multiple times, like multiple times over a span of a certain period, people are going to miss it. They're too busy. It just goes past their feed. So we make sure that we're repetitive for some of our content. We provide different value propositions for the same piece of content over a period of time. That helps us test it, but it also helps us ensure that our audience sees it. And there's more work that needs to be done in terms of engaging with the audience to start to do some influencer social media marketing, which we haven't really had a chance to do. And can do even from a B2B perspective where our audience are, enterprise size organizations. You can still definitely find some influencers to start engaging with online. So that's kind of the next step for us for our social media strategy.
Yeah. I mean, influencers, I think, is a very underutilized strategy in B2B and particularly in healthcare. And there are some
You're an influencer. We'll be using you. I'm just kidding.
Am I an influencer?
There are a lot of influencers. There's a lot of people in the healthcare industry who like to talk about where healthcare is going, because that's what passions are. We want to align with them because we're passionate about it too. And so you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of people who don't think that you can do influencer marketing from a B2B perspective, or a lot of people who think influencer marketing is only those people on TikTok who reach out and say, hey,
exactly.
Freebie. And it's not.
Getting a Kardashian to pump your brand or whatever. Yeah, no, it's not that at all. Very interesting. You're definitely thinking ahead. So Lucy, this has been great. I really insightful, really interesting. And I ask everybody this last question, and that is, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? Something that you wish you'd known earlier.
If I just go back 18 months from when I joined Smile, I think the piece of advice I would give myself is to stop and think and focus and spend a little more time at the beginning to understand the industry, to understand who the players in the industry are, to go through every piece of research that you can get, to try and schedule interviews with people that you think are your target audience. It took us a long time to come with an understanding of who our personas are. And I feel like we spent some cycles doing some testing that could have been avoided had we not just jumped in. Obviously, we had to hit the ground running. Yep. But if we had taken a little bit of time to prioritize that, we would be farther ahead today.
Fascinating. That's really interesting. I think that's, I think a lot of people coming into healthcare suffer from the same thing. It is overwhelming, though. It is absolutely overwhelming. Well, that's true. That's great. Lucy, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Adam. That's great. Well, thank you. For everybody, anybody who's listening here, thank you for your time today. I just want to let you know that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, on Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast application is. You can also view the video as well through HIMSS TV, and we'll put a link in the show notes. And we've got, I think this is going to be probably the last podcast that we'll do in 2021. We have a ton coming up in 2022, so do subscribe. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of the year, everybody.